the whole idea behind this effective update was to let you know what's going on at the moment. We have had a broad movement in Iran, and this broad movement has effectively, this current wave started in September. So we effectively had 4 months of it. During this 4 months, a lot of things have happened in Iran, and a lot of changes have taken place. We have had gains from this movement. We have seen changes in the society. I think probably one thing that everybody agrees with is that there is no return to what was pre-September. That's for definite. There has been changes in terms of forcing back the state. The Islamic Republic has effectively had to accept, as a de facto probably, the recognition of the rights of women in terms of what they wear, in the sense that the whole idea of the working against the, what they called unacceptable dress code has become effectively something that they cannot enforce. That's definite. The segregation that they had in different workplaces and universities to start between men and women, again, has de facto been turned down. They used to have, for example, canteens, which was for girl students separate from the boys students, if you know what I mean. That kind of segregation, that nobody's heeding anything to that, and effectively they've broken that barrier. There have been a lot of pressure on the part of the movement in terms of what the state has done insofar as arrests and executions have been taking place. Many similar scenarios, and the balance of power to a large extent has changed from what it was pre-September. I mean, that is something which is given in the society, and everybody agrees with that. What we have also seen is a great push against what they used to call Islamic values and recognition of Islamic laws. That has been something which has become very much more difficult again for the state to enforce. And to a large extent, people have found the confidence, I think, particularly from the youth onwards, and that has had its own impact in terms of all aspects of life in the society. We're looking at arts, we're looking at universities, we're looking at workplaces, we're looking at the general confrontation between the people and the variety of security forces. In all of those aspects, there have been changes, and those changes are not possible to be taken back to pre-September. I think that is one thing which is definitely the case in Iran, in terms of specifically that of the women, that of the youth, and that of the confidence of pushing the Islamic forces back. Huge amount of military militancy, that's on one side. Huge amount of gathering together, supports and solidarities. We see it in all aspects of life within the society, and that has been growing. At the same time, we have had a lot of local organizations forming, and this is something which obviously, insofar as the Islamic Republic is concerned, is clandestine, but in terms of their role in the protests which are taking place across all cities is something that local people are aware of who they are and what they're doing. So from that point of view, a lot of changes in terms of the balance of power. The issue at the moment has been effectively continual polarization in the society. The Islamic Republic has got to take a stance. So let's break it down to separate sections. One section probably we could talk about is that of the Islamic Republic and the revolutionary movement. Perhaps another aspect would be that of the right-wing alternative to the Islamic Republic. And then I can talk about a little bit on the left and the working class from that point of view. So if I break it into those sections, I think that probably gives us a reasonable structure. Insofar as the Islamic Republic and that of the revolutionary movement is concerned, the Islamic Republic has got problems. On one hand, the issues that I think effectively all capitalist states are feeling in terms of the crisis which is going around, that's there. as a background. In Iran, obviously, there is inflation like everywhere else, rising, but we have the issue of hyper inflation as well, and rising prices and devaluation of the currency on a daily basis. Effectively, what you can buy today, you better buy today, because tomorrow you may not be able to afford it. That's the extent of the change in terms of the basic needs. On one hand, the Islamic Republic has been trying to set a scene of dialogue, what they call dialogue, between those who want to change and that of the Islamic Republic. There have been talks from a variety of authorities of the state that we need to converse, we need to discuss, we need to actually find ways that we can make changes. Some of the rules are not really compulsory. Some of the rules can be something that could be effectively, the person could be given a warning or be told about it rather than actually further arrest and things like that. That's on one hand. But at the same time, they are using obviously the usual route of the suppression by imprisonment and executions as another means along the way in order to ensure that they can actually push those two together. There is one thing about the arrest. There have been, over the past 4 months, according to the variety of sources, nobody knows the exact number, but the talk is around 20,000 arrests. There have been hundreds of executions, including underaged, quite a few underaged people. At the same time, the Islamic Republic needs to carry out some of these executions in order to actually ensure that its own forces do not fall into disarray. There have been casualties on both sides, but at the same time, the forces of the Islamic Republic need to feel the confidence that the state is actually backing them. And part of the executions is effectively one of the ways of the Islamic Republic reinforcing its own forces, as well as obviously the issue of suppression. There has been a lot of cracks in the whole state. A variety of authorities from different parts have actually come out and have started to say this cannot be done, this is not acceptable, we are facing an avalanche coming in front of us, and if we don't do anything, then this avalanche would engulf us all. So therefore, we might as well start thinking about criticism of the state and changes and reforms requirements. This is what we see effectively continuously. Meanwhile, they are actually using all of their forces into scenarios where they have to give them a variety of trainings, special meetings to stop the breakdown that they actually are facing in the whole apparatus of the state. We have this on one hand. For example, just to give you one scenario, we see the brother of the head of the whole national media, the state TV, for example, has become and has left the country over about, I think, 18 months ago or so, and has sought to become a political refugee in Canada. A variety of issues like this to publicly coming out and saying this cannot work and we need to make changes. So we see changes on the top, but what we see is while the lower levels probably fall and actually move out of the state apparatus, the higher levels tend to actually go towards the right-wing alternative. These are the main heads of the sections which are actually leaving the state. We have alongside the way, as I said, the tool of pressure of expense of daily life to such a level that people actually are seeing a lot more pressure on themselves, unable to actually cope, increases in poverty to a very, very large scale, with large numbers, millions and millions are joining every day to the sections of what is known as under poverty line, according to even the Islamic Republic's own statistics. We have, on the other side, the right wing and that of the revolutionary movement and the contradictions between these two. The overall objective of the right wing has been to find a way of taking over the state, effectively being able to change hand on the top. And what the right wing has been pushing is that they need to gain acceptance from generally the states of the West. And the main emphasis has been that people got to be on the street, and they have brought in a variety of their own self-proclaimed leaders who have come, and they are talking to a variety of states in European Parliament, right up to US, UN, etc., and different places, NATO, and all of these places. That the conversation has been that people are on the street, and we need to do something. We need to make a change, and the change can only be done if we take power and keep the apparatus of the state as it is. The overall objective of the right wing has been that outside Iran, there are a variety of estimates. The highest estimate is about 8 million Iranians outside Iran. Population is 80 million, so 10%, roughly equivalent, is outside Iran. And in this population, which has actually come in support, generally in support of the mass protest movement in Iran, the right wing has been going around, and you might have seen it in different demonstrations or marches with their flags. And effectively, if there is only 10 of them, there are 200,000 flags around. The whole intention behind that is to give the picture that the whole of the abroad generally is in favor of a right-wing change, a regime change scenario, and a change of hands from the top. And that is the overall intention of what they're falling into. Two issues with that. On the side of the effectively Western governments, they're fearful. They're fearful because they've had one experience of this before. Last time in 1979, they went in support of Khomeini. UK, France, US, effectively their main meetings that they had with Khomeini pre-hand was to change the state from the top. And the whole idea was that after that meeting, Khomeini was supposed to go to Iran. The army has already said, I agree, and we can change hands and transfer. But the actual people on the ground decided not to stop, and they went for a complete armed insurrection, which blew up the whole thing. And the Islamic Republic came to power with the intention of rebuilding what they had before. The secret police was rebuilt using the old ones. The army stayed in the side of Khomeini, and then they had to form a variety of different paramilitary groups and their own security forces, like the Pasdarans and the rest, the Revolutionary Guards, and all of these were effectively produced with one intention, to be able to crack down what Shah could not crack down. Now, this time round, the scenario is different. We are not in the Cold War era that we were in 1979 of West and East as such. We are not in the scenario of looking at a right-wing alternative that could effectively have position in Iran and be able to ensure that the situation does not move towards the left and the socialist alternatives, and they are not certain that that would definitely be the case. So insofar as the Western governments are concerned, I think despite a lot of media's variety of announcements, etc., overall, the West is still hand in hand and is happy with Islamic Republic to stay. That is definitely the case. There's pressure on the Islamic Republic. They use pressure, but it's only at the stage of pressure. The West has still not decided to choose the right-wing alternative, not necessarily because they are any better or worse than the Khomeini's time, but mainly because they have got one issue, and that is uncertainty about what goes on in Iran. The movement in Iran is not like that of the 1979. The right wing does not have the apparatus that the Khomeini at the time or the Islamic forces at the time had. Society has changed from 33 million to 80 million, is a lot more conscious, polarization is hugely more, and there is no certainty that they could change anything from the top. So from that point of view, there is, although pressure on the Islamic Republic, but there is no definite intention of any change. Two, people in Iran have, on a wider scale, have refused to accept any change from the top. A variety of demonstrations, marches, slogans everywhere. There is no certainty that anybody is actually following in larger scale, massive scale, following the right-wing agenda. And that in itself is something which is different. Also, the actual movement in Iran today is, again, very different from that of the 1979, because the thing that they have got, and what we hear quite often, and anybody or all the media who have looked at it, they said the question is not about going of the Islamic Republic, but about how it goes and what replaces it. This is something which we didn't have in 1979. In 1979, the idea was Shah must go. Afterwards, we talk. This time round, that is not the scenario. And that background has changed drastically. So from that point of view, the right wing at the moment, right now, we see a huge amount of disarray among its forces. A variety of right wing, extreme right wing, are effectively trying to push themselves right to the forefront. And when I say extreme right wing, this is the right wing that says we are against the reaction of black, i.e. the Islamic Republic, and red, i.e. that of the socialists. And that is very clear cut. We're still seeing polarization, and this polarization, which was starting and effectively has picked up a lot in Iran, is growing outside the Iranians, outside Iran as well. The right wing is under pressure because they haven't been able to make that headway. Insofar as the left and the revolutionary movement is concerned, I did mention at the beginning some of the gains that we have had. The nature of this movement, this revolutionary movement, is very, very left-wing. Everybody applies and sees that. The impact of the singular slogan, which was woman, life, freedom, in terms of recognition of the importance of the equality in terms of the rights of women, which is what was very clear under the Islamic Republic, the recognition of the right to have a decent life and a safe life as part of the life which follows that, and the idea of freedom from the point of view of being able to actually live as what is acceptable and what is recognized as freedom of expression in all its aspects. These three effectively represents a movement that the right wing or no section of bourgeoisie can actually follow, because the only way they can actually survive it is by dismantling all of these. Secondly, is very much more left-wing, because the intention behind this has been growing and has grown. We see it quite publicly now. And the alternative is that the only way that we can ensure that we can get something done is if we actually move away from the idea of distant elections or things like that and move to direct elections, i.e. that of the councils, and the growth of recognition of the councils in working places, in localities, and obviously what we have as the alternative as the Congress of the Councils as the immediate power that could take over as soon as the Islamic Republic downfall has been established. Also, the idea is that the Islamic Republic is not facing what they are claiming to be just a political force. The situation in terms of the cost of living, the situation with regard to the unacceptability of the pressure which is on the working class, lack of recognition of the right to organization and strike, which has been again de facto gone out of the window from the point of view of enforcing it by the Islamic Republic. And all of these are something which is growing and growing further. It is still at the local levels to a large extent. It is in a variety of cities. It hasn't become national. And that, I think, is what the task of the socialists are at the moment. Two, the second point that the left is pushing, or socialists are pushing, is recognition that everything, not just parts or bits and pieces of the apparatus of the state, but the whole thing must be dismantled, something which the right wing is trying to retain. And that's another part which is making headway in terms of the movement, and the movement actually says we don't accept anything which has got anything to do with the Islamic Republic, whether it is Revolutionary Guard, whether it is the army, whether it is the state apparatus of all bureaucracy and everything else. So that movement in itself, again, needs building and needs to become as an alternative to the society which can be chosen across the whole country. Last but not least, organization in terms of the political parties. Everybody knows that Iran is one of those countries where the capitalists had never accepted political parties from Shah's time, or even before, or even during the Islamic Republic. During Shah's time, Shah came up and said that anybody who is Marxist is obviously a terrorist. We don't recognize that. Two, when it came to the time of the parties, there was only one party, and everybody had to become a member of that party. And if they didn't, they could leave the country. That was his main point of view. The same in the Islamic Republic time. The capitalists in Iran, the bourgeoisie in Iran, does not have a party as such. They do not accept any form of party, and that cannot be done if you want to enforce and ensure that the surplus value is created and appropriated as in Iran has been and the way it has been. So that is one issue. But at the same time, we have had parties. That's why most of the left are clandestine from that point of view. But growth in the party and becoming members of the parties are actually on the rise up. And this is something which what we want to push is being able to form and being able to have mass parties that can actually operate as mass parties. And these are the main areas where we could ensure that the least costly from the time, from the life point of view, would be to get rid of the Islamic Republic and ensure that the people can actually rule by themselves, on themselves, through their own councils and through an alternative which they put to the Islamic Republic, and dismantle everything, all armed forces, all of the security forces, all of the intelligence services and everything else. And that is, I think, one thing that we are pushing. And this is the path that we can actually make it least costly in terms of this transfer. Overall, this gives you a picture of the work. There has been recently, what we're seeing is a growth in the number of strikes again. We have it in the oil and petrochemical industries. We have it in the steel industry. We are seeing it in different parts. The Islamic Republic tried to give some meager values or upholding of the payment of the wages in order to ensure that they keep it as much separate and avoid any form of mass scale protest of the workers. But we're seeing growth in this, and the fact that people are saying, or in workplaces from, as I said, different factories and industries, right up to schools, teachers, etc., that this is not the way that the country can move forward. And the only way is if we do have a decent life, have security, have an end to the Islamic Republic rule, and be able to say how the society should be run, effectively the rule of the councils. And this is what we're seeing at the moment.